Good evening. My name is Nathaniel Watkins, and welcome to Impact 2020. For those of you who've been here before, this is our continuing conversation about issues that are related and relevant to us in this community, to us as Christians, to us as individuals. Just as always, if you have any questions or any comments, please type those questions into the comment section. We will try to address those as we can. You can bring the comment up on the screen and continue on the discussion. What we have today is a special discussion. And for those of you who have been here before and have been here in the previous weeks, you know we've been talking about the role of people in our current climate, in the climate of social justice, in the climate of change that's been going on. Last week, we talked about the role of people of significant power, celebrities, people with lots of money. This week, we are going to talk about the role and the responsibility of the church. More so, we can bring it in to the Black church or church or Christians. To do that, we have two special guests with us, two Richmond, Virginia area pastors. We have Dr. Marlon Haskell, and we also have Reverend Marcus Martin. Dr. Haskell, the past president of the Baptist Ministers Conference, and Reverend Martin, the pastor of New Bridge. And so, bring these guys in. Thank you for joining us today.
My pleasure.
All right, so we're going to hop right into it. We're going to hop right into the issues. And so, basically, we're going right to social justice. So everyone knows what's been going on. When we're talking about police brutality, we've been talking about the marches and the issues of trying to push along the rights of different individuals, Black and brown people who have been oppressed or abused, as we can say. And so as we've watched the riots and as we've watched people push for change, the question that we have is, what is the role of the church? What is the role of the Black church in this? And so the first part is leadership. And that's always the first answer that people want to run to, like, well, you know, they don't have a leader. There's no real leader out here. It's just a type of homegrown movement. Do you think that the church needs to have a leadership role? Dr. Haskell, I'm going to start off with you. What do you think the role of the church is? What should we be doing to support or lead this movement?
The Black church has a very special role in the community. It has had that historically. And I think that we've moved away from that, unfortunately. But the fact of the matter is, the Black church should be the leader, empowering the people, informing the people, and inspiring the people to do what needs to be done for the betterment of the community and for the world as a whole. That simply means is that we just can't come into the church and just sing, shout, and think that we're giving God glory. I think that really transfers into a lot of just empty noise and tinkling cymbals. But to really be the church is to live it out in its full expression, and that is to address the ills in our society, the racism, the injustice, the poverty, being illiterate, all of those things what the Black church has done for years, and that is to teach our people, to elevate our people, to encourage our people, to support our people. And right now, since we're going through a pandemic, I think it's important for the Black church to rise up and say to their congregation is that this is something that we need to do, the vaccinations, because I think our chances are better surviving and thriving than not having it. I think the pastors ought to be leading the charge and getting the vaccinations, and I've seen several in my area do that. I'm hoping to get mine soon, and that's to say to the parishioners is that I believe in this. And so I think it's going to be for our betterment. And so let's come on and do that. And let me just say this, even if the Black church does not empower itself, you got to look at our counterpart, the white churches. They are doing just that. They tell their people how to vote and who to vote for. They teach them how to affect the political agendas, and the Black church hasn't done that too well, but I'm hoping that's about to change. And so the Black church needs to be about social justice. It needs to be about elevating us intellectually while we're also engaging the spiritual part of ourselves.
All right.
Thanks,
Reverend
man.
Mark, we're going to jump in and basically ask you the same question when we're talking about leadership.
You know, I agreed a lot with what Dr. Haskell said. I think that the church needs to take leadership. Yet, when I think of the church, I think we oftentimes get caught up in institutional church. So let's go back to the civil rights movement, for example. The truth of the matter is the majority of African American churches did not support the civil rights movement. Most of those churches told Dr. King, hey, leave us alone. It's not that time yet. You know, the world isn't ready for that. Let's wait on that. Really, what it was the movement of some churches, and it was a lot to do with what went on college campuses, what went on in communities. And so there were certain churches that became hubs for the movement. But the church, the institutional church as a whole, did not necessarily embrace it. So I think that when we look at the church, we have to move away from institutional church, and we have to move to what real and I believe true church is, which is community of people who aren't necessarily set in a building or in a place, but are like-minded people who are attempting to not allow the gates of hell to prevail in this world. And so when I say yes, the church, I'm believing that the group of people, LBGTQ, Blacks, those who are incarcerated, persons that are struggling. And even when you look at, a Black struggle, poor whites oftentimes find themselves in the same situation we find ourselves in. And so I think as we get to this idea of the church, I think we need to broaden it a bit to make sure that it is all encompassing of not just institutional or what we now think of as just brick and mortar or denominations, but rather the church, a group of people, of believers who come together to do those things. So I'm all for that. I think that that is the way progress has been made and will continue to be made. And without that faith component, I don't think that the progress is going to be made. And I see it sizzling out in a lot of movements that we've had within the past decade. A young Black brother, sister gets killed. There's a movement that goes on. But without faith, those movements don't sustain. They don't last. And so how do you get a people to walk 360 plus days to boycott buses? How do you do that? That's faith. That's something that I think is oftentimes missing. I've done marches, and the part that's missing is the faith. Now, we got all the chants for social justice, no justice, no peace, no justice, no peace, no justice, no peace. But what do we do after the march? What happens after the march? And I think that's where we need a consolidated leadership. We need a group of persons whom everybody can buy into and trust to be able to be those that voice for us at the table when we're talking to legislators, when we're talking to banks and lending institutions and credit institutions, when we're talking to the educational boards and foundations and things of that nature. We need that consolidated body. And that's where I believe the civil rights movement took some leap and steps, because they had a consolidated group of people who met with people like Lyndon Baines Johnson and said, no, now is the time. And right now we don't have that, because we have a multitude of homegrown leaders, but we do not have those persons who are going to speak for the whole of the community.
Yeah. Well, you hit some good points there. You kind of went where I was going to go. Dr. Haskell, how do we, one of the things that I heard you say was that, we be out front as leaders. And so, but how do we as the church, how do we as people of the faith be all inclusive? So the fight for civil justice, the fight includes LGBTQ, it includes atheists, includes Muslims, includes different populations. We are the church here on one side, and at the same time, we're not just fighting for ourselves, we're fighting for others. And how do we be inclusive in the fight, but at the same time not complicit in letting ourselves kind of slip a little bit, or our identity slip a little bit, because we're trying to be inclusive?
And I think Reverend Martin is onto something, is that once you move beyond the brick and the mortar, then you're talking about individuals, but it's still the church. And the church is made of baptized believers in Jesus Christ. That's the Christian church. Now, what we have to understand is that so often there's been division in the church because certain things were deemed as unholy, ungodly, and unconscionable. So let's just deal with the elephant in the room, as Reverend Martin mentioned, LGBTQ community. So often maybe it was perceived that the church would not embrace them, but they really did. They just did it under the table, because a lot of the singers and musicians in the church really were of that persuasion. And the churches didn't have a problem with them as long as they were sharing their gifts. But now, if you're talking about a movement, now you don't want to come and support that openly because they're still humans, because the gospel talks about basically looking out for all of humanity. I am my brother's keeper, my sister's keeper, and I cannot alienate them just because I disagree with their lifestyle or their choices. Because if I'm going to love my brothers and sisters, right, then that includes everybody, and then stay in my lane and not get out of my pay range, and just let God be God and let God do the judging, but I do the working for God as God orchestrates my footsteps. And that means that, yes, we have to pull together, hold hands with people of different religious persuasions, but still remain the church, which is the Christian church, and not lose our identity, as you were saying. And that takes a lot of growth on the part of some pastors, because some pastors are so rigid and their understanding of their faith that they cannot allow for room that we work with people outside of Christianity. But then again, we have to understand is that we all are in this thing together. I like the way Dr. King said it. Dr. Martin Luther King talked about the beloved community, and that is, we are a community of people, different shades, different lifestyles, but yet we have to come together for the greater good of the whole world.
You know, that how can I put it? In order to get beyond exclusion and get to inclusion, I think we have to rework, hear this now, the brand of Christianity we have received from slave masters. Hear this, and I know that people may be listening and they might, I don't want you to get offended. I want you to think about this. When we came as enslaved people to America, nobody asked us if we believed in Jesus. The presupposition is we were savages and heathens, and we did not know God. Therefore, we needed to know God and get to understand him, therefore be baptized. Be baptized what? In a Eurocentric Christian way. As a result, the religion that has been passed down to us is a religion of not inclusion, but exclusion. Because we were excluded based upon the color of our skin. We were excluded based upon where we came from. And this country of America that we call a melting pot has ultimately been based upon what? Exclusions. We include who we want, and then we exclude who we want.
Right.
No wonder our churches are still what? The most exclusive or separated body we have. And that's what they say. What? 11 o'clock is the most segregated time? Because our religion, our Christianity, the brand of Christianity has been tainted by the Eurocentric mindset and myth of Anglo-Saxon dominance. And as a result, now we've already started categorizing people and putting people in certain boxes. Here's the LBGT folks over here. Here are the black folks over here. Here are the ones with the felonies over here. We have all these labels for people because why? We were labeled. NIGGA, black, boy, gal, colored. And so we've got to now begin to rework our Christianity because I contend it is not the true form of what Jesus was teaching and practicing. And I think that comes a point where we have to really begin to delve and get past our cultural implications and seek solutions based upon, I believe, a true and more a wholesome form of Christianity. Here, Jesus walks around and he doesn't mind dealing with lepers. He doesn't mind dealing with prostitutes. He doesn't mind dealing with tax collectors who will seem the worst of them. But we have to have the discussion in the church. Wow. Why? Because culture is key. And in a capitalistic society, you always want to have what? The 1% exclusive folks on the top. And then everybody else comes underneath. And so how do you break that 1%? That 1% ain't meant to be broken. That's an exclusive group.
Yeah.
Huh? Yeah. And based upon that, guess what? All of us who are low look up. And now we what? We want what the exclusive have. We want their cars. We desire their clothes. We desire their homes. We desire to have the money like they do. And all the while, we're really selling out the true principles, I think, of what it means to be like Christ and to be close to God. And that means to be connected with our brothers and sisters and not insulated from them based upon our finances, money, or even religious beliefs.
Well, let's talk a little bit of money as we move along in time. And so, Dr. Haskell, you talked about, staying in your lane. So when you have both deal with the politics of church, and you have individuals who say, look, I'm not getting on board with Black Lives Matter. That's a political thing, and that's not what I come to church for. Or I'm a Democrat, and I don't hear this, or I'm a Republican and I don't want to hear this. And let's keep the politics out of the church. Separation of church and state. You hear all of this. Where is that line drawn? And especially when we're talking about the money into it. Look, I don't want to upset, Miss So-and-so, because, she's giving at a high level. And I got to make sure I hit this note every single month. So I don't want to upset the wrong group by saying something. There's been a lot of pastors who had to toe that line, whether I need to go too far supporting the underprivileged community, or do I need to make that note? What's the message? What's the message there, Dr. Haskell, that you would have, just to let people know about those pressures? Where do you come down on that?
Let me reiterate or clarify what I meant by staying in my lane. What I meant by staying in my lane is not trying to be God and decide who I should work with or who's worthy of my help. That's God's work. And so staying in my lane is to pray to God and let God direct my footsteps. And that oftentimes would mean that I have to go against the people who have the money or the power in my church, because they may not be in line with God, and most of the time they're not. And so that takes a strong conviction, a strong constitution to say, I'm answering to the Lord. I'm going to be his drum major. I'm not here to please any one particular group, but I'm here to carry out the word of God. I'm here to be the prophet, to speak truth to power, to let God have his power manifested in me. And a part of that manifestation is to help my people understand is that as long as you're humans, you're dealing with politics. Just if Marcus and I are having a conversation to decide to do something, that's politics, because we have to make a decision. Most people want to use politics and make it nasty, make it dirty, at least in the Black church. However, the dominant church doesn't have a problem being political. they're always exercising their will and their power and what they want to have done. But it's the Black church is like, oh, no, we just want to come here and sing and shout. Well, that's not total Christianity right there. Total Christianity is to go out and live out the expression. I'm starting in the Old Testament. It says, I am my brother's keeper. And then, as Reverend Martin alluded to be like Jesus. It is to go and deal with the disinherited, the disenfranchised, the have-nots, and those who are even depressed and disillusioned, the despondent. We have to help our churches understand the totality of what it means to be Christian. And that's more than just Bible study and prayer service. But now that you've gotten that word, now that I have informed you, I've illuminated your mind, your understanding, I've dismantled some of the stuff that's been passed on to you. As Marcus said, when we first came here, they assumed we didn't know God. We knew God. Africans knew God, but they wanted they wanted the Black folks to know the white Jesus so that they could control us. Right. But they didn't give us the true version of Christianity, because the Christianity they had was capitalism and colonialism. And that is that they were going to dominate and subjugate another race of people in the name of Christianity. And so Marcus is onto something. We got to tear down that European presentation of the gospel. And let me just say this too. You didn't ask, but I'm going to say it anyway. And it starts with pulling down those white Jesuses in the Black church too. Take them off the wall, right? Because
Watch
we know he
yourself,
was not
Reverend.
white.
Watch yourself. Watch yourself now.
I'm stepping in it, right, Marcus? But I'm just simply saying, if we're going to start tearing down that European Christianity, let's start with the pictures. And that's why a lot of Black folks have a problem with the Black church too. It's like they say, well, you serving a white Jesus.
Right.
Okay. But the fact is, we have to educate even our own folks that Jesus was not white. So let's get to the pure Christianity, which has been distorted in America because it's all about capitalism. Marcus was right. It is. It's about subjugation. It's about power. But they also want to frame it, well, Jesus died for your sins. They don't want to talk about, feeding the less fortunate. They don't want to talk about taking care of babies once they're born, but they do want to push the agenda pro-life. We don't believe in killing unborn babies. Well, you don't have an agenda to take care of them once they're born. So that's a contradiction. And so for me, when I say stay in my lane, that is for me, Marcus, and that is to Nathaniel to just say, I'm staying in my lane and let the Lord lead me. You know the song we used to sing in church, lead me, guide me. Well, that's
All
what I
along
need
the way.
our ministers and our people to do. Lord, you lead me and guide me, and not let me do what I want to do and do it my way. Because if I do it my way, there is going to be exclusion. There is going to be just, let's be safe, let's be passive, let's all just get along, and the Lord's going to fix it. Well, the Lord wants to fix it through us. We are his hands and his feet. We are his voice. That's why he called people like me and Marcus, cry loud and spare not, shake the bushes, right? Speak truth to power, be instant in season and out of season, you know. And so the whole thing is we need people to stand up and not be concerned about the good paycheck, being popular, but how about being righteous, being pleasing to the Father?
But
Get you in on this. So I'm gonna get this comment in real quick that we got, where it says evangelical churches believe that the focus of the church should be on individual salvation. They frown upon churches that practice what they call social gospel. So, in your response, if you could just touch in on that a little bit as well.
Exactly. Go ahead, Marcus.
Oh no, I think that Kenneth Walken, he hits it head on.
Yes.
You can't have individual salvation without social salvation. Okay, that's the catch when you're dealing with colonialism or colonialized mind, is that there's always a division. But in African, it was the whole thing. In other words, the water wasn't separate from the land. They all worked together.
Right.
You can't talk about individual salvation or saving somebody's soul, and you don't work on the environment or on the atmosphere, the setting in which one lives. Jesus, and here's where I get focused. How many folk did Jesus save? How many folks did he baptize? How many folks did he lead in what we call the sinner's prayer? He went around doing good for them, healing them, delivering them, feeding them, setting them free. And he taught parables that talked about transforming the world. What is the one thing he walked around saying? The kingdom of heaven is at hand. Our job is to bring heaven here.
That's right.
People are living in hell. The kingdom of heaven is at hand. And we fail to bring it because we think it's the job, watch this, of government. Government's job is to do what? Maintain the status quo that has built the empire. Even right now, the Republicans are faced with a decision. Do we go with Trump and tear down the empire, or do we vote to impeach him and maintain the empire? And the same carriage we ask those Republicans to vote and impeach Trump, guess what? We don't ask for it in our churches. We don't seek it from our ministers. We don't ask them, yo, preacher, you know, I heard about 3,500 deliverance sermons. When you gonna talk about mass incarceration? When you gonna talk about the inequities in the educational system? Preacher, we've been talking deliverance and I'm still in the same hell. I think I've been delivered 35,000 times, and every time I wake up, I'm still in the same place because we have failed to look at the gospel and see that it has social impacts.
But who's failed? Who caused the church to fail?
I believe that it is. I believe that it is on us as leaders, but I believe it is also part and parcel to the colonialized mind. Because watch this. You can only be what you see. And this society has a way of
Buffering.
You might be on Impact, might be on TBN, might be at the big stage at Hampton or National Baptist or whatever. And we see that that's what folks see. That's what they want to be like. Because watch this, the brother that preaches the real stuff, the sister that preaches the real stuff, you ain't always popular.
But check this out, Marcus. If you go back historically and look at the Black church, when you look at Adam Clayton Powell Jr. and Sr., their church began to thrive when they were preaching liberation and empowerment in the Black community.
Yes.
Right. And then when you had people like Leon Sullivan up in Philadelphia, he was doing the church outside of the four walls and going into the community to empower the people intellectually, even financially, how to get your own so you're not dependent on the system. And to have some people, even now, our contemporaries, that are preaching liberation and empowerment. When you think of Otis Morse III, when you think of Freddie Haynes, those are some of the names when you think of Cynthia Hale and Gina Stewart. They're preaching the gospel, but they're also dealing with social justice on a phenomenal level, right? But we need more leaders like that. And Marcus is one of those. He pushes the envelope, if you will, to change what people expect in the church. And he tells his people, this is what we have to do. This is what I'm going to do. And I need your help to do it. Right.
But social preaching social justice or preaching about social issues can't be a tagline in a sermon.
Oh, I agree.
And what I find with a lot of persons, it's just a piece.
Yeah.
Within a message. So we're gonna preach about, the three Hebrew boys getting delivered from the fiery furnace, right? And in that, I'm gonna throw in something about some social issue.
Right.
That's to me a failure.
I agree. It needs to be a solid sermon.
Because you don't take the time to wrestle with the text and how the text really deals with this,
Right.
and really give the due attention. And so, I just say that it is Martin Luther King was one of the greatest examples, because when he preached about a deficiency of love in America, or the whole message was geared towards that. The whole message was focused on that. And so I'm concerned that we use it to say, yo, I'm preaching social justice, but it's just the tagline in my message.
Right.
Rather than being the subject that I'm going to deal with, or the series that I'm going to deal with for the next month or two.
Oh, there you go. A series, not a tagline, not a moment, but a movement. Right. And Marcus, what would happen? Let's just take our environment. If for the whole month, not February because it's Black History Month, but how about another month where we all pastors agree we're going to preach social justice messages for the whole month? Right. I mean, we're not going to necessarily, okay, forgive me for a moment. We're not going to so much concentrate on being saved, because most of the people in church say they're saved anyway, but might be living hellish lives. And then they got to deal with hell when they go on the job. Right. And so the thing is, we got to preach deliverance in a social context and not just use it as a tagline.
Yeah.
Because check this out, Marcus. When you listen to all the speeches, if you will, of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., how many times did he say you must be saved? How many times did he say come to Jesus? I'm just raising the question. I'm not saying, because we know he was a Christian preacher, right? But he also knew there was a higher calling other than personal salvation, right? But need to be delivered from this evil system, that has been oppressing us for centuries. Because you do know, back in the good old days in the 16 and 1700s, they used the black itinerant preachers to go around and keep the niggers in line and telling them, obey their masters. If you're going to be a good Christian, you obey your masters. But until then, the black preachers realized they were being duped and used. Then they became rebels, right? And so the thing, Marcus, is I think you're right on it, is that we have to get away from the tagline and be intentional and intense about preaching the social gospel, which Jesus did. Because Howard Thurman, Benjamin Mays, all of those guys talked about, dealing with the disinherited, so that we can move beyond just singing and shouting, but actually living right here. Because the gospel says, I've come that you might have life and have it more abundantly. Well, I'm not living an abundant life, Nathaniel, if I'm living on food stamps, my EBT card, because the government controls that, right? I'm not living an abundant life, living in the projects and the heat's not working, right? And so we then look at this pie in the sky. It's going to be better when I die by and by. No, I want some of those things now, right? And I don't just want it for myself. I want it for the whole community, but I do want to start in the Black community, right? Because you got to start at home.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean I exclude anybody else, but I also put a heavy concentration on my people who've been suffering for so long, right? And they are my people, even though I'm cut from a different hue. I'm ivory, amen. But I'm still Black, right?
Amen, brother. Amen.
Well, fellas, our time is gone, but I have one more question that I want you to touch on before we go. This is a tough one. I'm not even gonna lie to you. I'm gonna phrase it like this. If a guy comes up to you and says, your mama can't cook, and you know that your mama can burn in the kitchen, you're not gonna just sit back and let this guy go around lying on your mom. Because you're just not gonna let nobody do that. So you're gonna say something like this dude's a liar, or you're gonna say something to him directly. Well, we have some pastors out here who are saying some things that I'm going to say myself, I consider lying on our Father. Saying some things like, it's okay when the immigrants come to the border and we take their children away from them. Because the man of God said that. The man that God put into power said that. So it's okay. We don't need to say anything against that. It's okay when Black people say that their lives matter because they're getting choked out, a knee on their neck. It's okay because, again, it's all right. Let's preach about something else. Or it's okay when when you have people who, like you said, on food stamps, and we have a poor population that's growing and growing. So you have people who are misrepresenting the church as leaders. What is your responsibility to directly address them in whatever fashion, whether it means directly talking to them directly or whether it means speaking up against what they're saying? Because I look at it like this. When it's all said and done and Jesus comes to us and say, well, you saw that man taking our sheep that way. Why didn't you say something? Why didn't you grab my sheep and bring him back to where he's supposed to be? So to both of you, Marcus, I'm going to go ahead and start with you. What is, as a leader, your responsibility to address other leaders or other people who say that they represent the church?
I think that, and maybe that's why my preaching circle of friends is small.
Shrinking.
And it's because I do have those conversations, and I recognize too that some people will never get there. And I think that the true job is to recognize that one of the most stubborn groups in the world is preachers. One of the most stubborn groups. Okay. Everybody knows it all. Everybody knows it all. Everybody has the answer already. Everybody, you can put 300 preachers in a room and everybody got something different to say or say the same thing in a different way. It's just the way, I guess, being a leader is. I guess it's like being in the halls of Congress. You just got these people who are just stuck on their agenda or what they think or what they believe or what they say. I think it's incumbent to raise up the next generation of preachers that are different and to prep the church for that difference. And so I think that is what I think we need to challenge our seminaries. Our Bible schools are oftentimes very Eurocentric and medieval in their teaching. Love them to death, but nobody cares about learning several preaching styles. Let me tell you why. Because grandma don't know which one you using. She wants to know, is there a word from the Lord? What does God have to say about my grandson being locked up? And she don't care whether you're using a dialectical, application, correlational, or what have you. And I think we need to begin to start to shift even the way in which we teach theology. Some are still dealing with systematic theology and not contextual theology. We waste a good amount of time on not prepping ministers to be effective. When I was in seminary, they talked about Martin Luther King, but I didn't see not one example of anybody doing social justice work. Am I right, Marlon?
You're right.
That black seminary, supposed to be very radical and very what's the name, and they aren't out there marching. When Freddie Gray dies, when Eric Garner dies, when anyone dies, nobody's out doing a thing. And so I think it's incumbent to begin to prep this and to get this next generation going. And I think that's where a lot of time and effort and energy needs to be spent, and also attempting to cultivate those relationships. And we need to say something, but always remember, the masses will always be led astray.
Mm.
And the Bible speaks of that in terms of a prophetic way.
Mm-hmm.
That at the end, you're going to find a lot of people who say, yo, Lord, didn't I do this for you? Didn't I do that for you? He's going to say, yo, dude, I didn't even know you. you ain't nowhere on. And that's going to be real.
Yeah.
And so, that is what I would think the solution is. And it's really to unravel the colonialized mind. And we in Virginia are heavily colonialized, like the rest of the nation, but we celebrate it here. All the kids learn about Jamestown, the Native Americans, and Christopher Columbus, and Pocahontas, and all of that. And she got married. And it does what? It creates a symbol in your head. And just like, we were talking about pulling down the white sheet. Well, if you pull it down, what symbol you gonna put up? And and we're oftentimes afraid to really embrace our symbol. One of the symbols I love to death is Nat Turner. Here was a preacher who was used.
That's right.
By his master and by the system to preach a gospel to subdue slaves, until one day he saw something and he wrestled with God about it, and it changed his preaching. And we have community that don't want to embrace Nat Turner, and he lived right down the road. Mm. And here Nat Turner is a preacher who shifted, but we don't want to see him because what? He killed them white folk, and we don't want to bother with Nat Turner because Nat Turner might ruffle some feathers. But we don't mind raising up Christopher Columbus, who slaughtered all of the culture in San Juan, Puerto Rico, who slaughtered all of the culture up in Dominican Republic, who came down into the Americas and killed off all of the Native Americans, but we raise him up as a hero. Hmm. And I think we need to make the shift, and we need to begin to understand that just because he's my hero don't mean he got to be your hero. And your hero don't have to be my hero. But I'm going to hold on to my hero because my hero has symbolism to me. Mm-hmm. And if we embrace that symbol of Nat Turner, I think we all can come to a point where we recognize that what we have been preaching has not been getting the job done. It has been helping folks to hold on, but it hasn't been helping folks to break out.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Dr. Haskell, same question. What is the, responsibility of leaders like yourself towards other leaders who are preaching something or saying something that's not consistent with what you think is the word of God?
I agree with Marcus in saying that we need to cultivate a new generation, raise up a new generation of ministers. But I want to push it a bit further. And yes, Marcus did allude to, we need to say something to our contemporaries. But just saying something one time doesn't change it. It has to be done repeatedly, even though we're going to get ostracized, even though you're not going to get preaching engagements. But you're not doing this for them. I'm doing this for the Lord who called me out of darkness into the marvelous light. And my preaching circle of comrades is very small. I remember raising the question with a group of ministers years ago in a group setting. It's like, you just don't love preachers, do you? I said, no, I raised the questions because I love them so much, but I love the Lord more. And I just want us all to get back to the old landmark. And we said, I've decided to make Jesus my choice. As opposed to choosing the world of fame and fortune and, getting the preaching engagements, right? Because the reality is that Marcus says is so prophetic is that he didn't say this, but I'm going to push it and say, yeah, the masses, many there will be who won't find it and more going to end up in hell than heaven. And I believe there are going to be a lot of pastors and preachers in hell because they have distorted the gospel. They have given it over. They've given up so much of the gospel for their self-improvement, their self-benefit, that they're going to lose their eternal reward. I believe that a lot of people are going to bust hell wide open through the church, but I think a lot of ministers are going to bust hell wide open because they are preaching a falsified gospel. And so my job, and I encourage all ministers to take a look at ourselves individually, then come together around a round table and say, what must I do to be changed? What do I have to repent of? Because what I've been doing has been pleasing the masses who pay me. Because what I've encountered is in church, people say, we just want you to come here and preach us happy, Pastor, so we can go out and face the world tomorrow. We don't want to hear nothing about what we got to do for our brothers and sisters. We don't want to hear nothing about voting. We don't want to hear anything about changing anything. We just want to be happy because they think that they're blessed if they don't have to do anything. And so, Nathaniel, the reality is, yes, we do need to raise up a generation of younger pastors, but we also need to deal with those who are in power in the churches as pastors and say, the Lord has an ought with you. And he sent me to read the handwriting on the wall, because tonight your soul may be required of you because you're not doing what the Lord has called you to do, right? That's not popular. You're going to get doors slammed in your face. You're going to be talked about. But the Lord says, don't worry about the ones who can destroy the body. Worry about the one that can destroy the body and the soul. And that's my guiding mantra for ministry, for my life, and for fellowship with all of humanity, is to please the Lord.
Yeah.
You know, Caesar Clark said something. They got on Caesar Clark because at a certain time when Caesar was preaching, you had the civil rights movement going on, and there was this great tension between the pie in the sky gospel,
Yeah, right,
and the social gospel. And Caesar said, I'll never forget this in one of his sermons, he said, well, you got to have some pie sometime or you're going to starve. and so oftentimes people need that hope. They need that moment out and away from the pain and the ill and all of that. They need that. But we can't just go that in one way.
right.
It has to be a balanced meal. My hope is not in just what's to come. My hope is also relies in what I can do to make some things happen. And if not for me, at least for my children or my grandchildren. And so I think it's this balancing act that we have to, because I think that people need some moments where they can, shout their troubles over, they can forget about it, they can feel re-energized, but also there needs to become some instruction with that. Okay, yes, you got it for you, but now we got to work for everybody else.
And I agree with Caesar Clark, and I agree with you, Marcus, and I was trying to say that earlier. When I want some of the abundance, now I want some pie down here. I don't want to wait to get up there to get in the pie, right? But the fact is that I can get me a nice meal in church, in your sermon, give me some good meat, and then end it with a good gravy, right? Martin Luther King did that for me. I may not get there with you, but one day we're going to get to the promised land, right? He was still dealing with social justice, and he still shouted me, okay? We haven't gotten there yet, even 50 years later, but we still have that hope, Marcus.
Yeah.
That we're going to get there one day.
Yeah.
So.
All right. Well, I appreciate this. This was one of our better shows. For those who have been here multiple times, you know that our show's a little bit shorter, but we had good conversation that we needed to get to today. Had some meat, not just pie and fluff. I appreciate both of you joining us. I appreciate your thoughts and your input. And for everybody who's watching this live or to the people who watch this later on, please consider what was said today. I know I will go back, watch it again. But I want to thank you again for joining us. This is Impact 2021. We're here every week, every Tuesday. And so join us again next Tuesday at 8 o'clock. Thank you again for joining us. And y'all are welcome back anytime.
My pleasure.
Absolutely.
All right.
Thank you.